The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Oh, we got a lot of combine yak today. A lot of yakking going on yesterday. Adam Quinn. I knew I was going to do that. I might as well get that out of the way. It's Adam Peters and Dan Quinn. But after all these years, we have a real GM and a real coach to talk about with the football team. So it's Adam Peters and Dan Quinn. We'll get to their comments, what they said yesterday. There is some breaking news that I'm going to get to here in a second, and I will also tell you that we'll have some fun at the end of the show because Andy Reid tells a really funny story about Taylor Swift and how she endeared herself to the Kansas City Chiefs, not just to her beau, Travis Kelce, but to the entire football team. And we will get to that. The breaking news is this. FedEx Field, no more. No, they're not tearing down the stadium, not just yet. But the naming rights are coming off. It was a 27-year deal that was signed back in 1999. The agreement was set to expire in 2026. But because of a clause in the contract, the FedEx company decided to get out of the naming rights deal. The clause is if the team is sold, they can drop the rights, which they chose to do. And that's going to cost the team about $15 million, which is what they were due to get from FedEx over the next 2 years. But they can shop around for a new name. And I don't know how successful they're going to be with this because this is not as easy as it once was. Up the road, you got M&T Bank Stadium, but they have never named Camden Yards after a sponsor. And Nats Park, which opened in 2008, that still doesn't have a name on it. So it might not be easy for them to do that, but this is something that I don't think they expected because of all the goodwill about new ownership. Like Ding Dong the Witch is dead. Wouldn't FedEx want to be associated with this group that includes Magic Johnson, one of the most charismatic people in the history of sports? Not to mention the new ownership group here, which is local and respected, unlike the last guy. But they chose to opt out of this, and now they have to find another sponsor. I was thinking about names. Commanders Park doesn't work because I was thinking about the old George Carlin routine about what's the difference between football and baseball. Football, you play in a stadium. Baseball, you play in the park. Football, you try to score. Baseball, the object is to go home. Yeah, so park doesn't work. Stadium doesn't quite feel right. And then I thought, well, what about Raljon? Does anybody remember Raljon? If you don't, when Jack Kent Cooke bought the land, which is Landover, when he bought the land to build the stadium in the mid-'90s, he said, I'm naming it after my two sons, Ralph and John, Raljon. And in maybe one of the best lines that Tony Kornheiser ever wrote, he said, well, it's a good thing the sons weren't named Pete and Ennis. But anyway, yeah, we're going to have something in place, or they'll just call it Commander's Stadium or something like that. Because if you remember this, too, it was built as Jack Kent Cooke Stadium. When it opened up in 1997, that's what it was called. Snyder bought the team in 1999 and quickly changed it to Redskins Stadium. But in that 1999 season, it was just like a few weeks into it when we got the name FedEx. It was going to be FedEx Field, and we had this naming rights deal, $205 million. I mean, you think about that in relative to the amount that he paid for the team. He paid $800 million for the team and the stadium, and he worked out a naming rights deal of $205 million. Pretty good. In this case, you've got a team that just sold for $6 billion, and this move by FedEx is going to cost them $15 million. $15 million to you and me, one thing. $15 million relative to the whole Megillah with the football team, not as big a deal. They're also announcing that or they announced it yesterday or the day before, that they're dumping $75 million just to fix this dump up, and they're probably going to be there for another 5 years or so. So $75 million to fix it up, and hopefully they can defray some of that with a naming rights deal. But at the moment, we don't have one. So that was the news that was broken by the Washington Post in the last hour or so. No more FedEx Field. News yesterday out of Indianapolis, comments from Adam Peters, the general manager, and Dan Quinn, the coach. I guess the big takeaway is they're not really tipping their hand on quarterback yet. And also, even though they have an awful lot of cap room, because this came out the other day that there's going to be massively more cap room than last year. I think it's an extra like $30 million per team. That gives them even more money to spend, but also it gives other teams money to spend. And the takeaway from Adam Peters was we're not going to go crazy in free agency. In other words, the 2000 gold rush isn't going to happen again when they went out and they got Deion Sanders and Bruce Smith and Mark Carrier and all the other, mess that they got themselves into. Jeff George, complete disaster. They're not going to do that again. These guys are smart, and they're going to build through the draft and be judicious in free agency. So the news conference for Adam Peters opened up this way. Kind of an odd question to start it off, but I guess it was the most revealing answer he gave in about the 12 or 13 minutes that he talked. He was asked about San Francisco acquiring, with the last pick of the draft 2 years ago, quarterback Brock Purdy.
His tape was what really turned us on, and then you meet the person. But this is only just a little bit part of the process, but his tape and everything that he did at Iowa State and how well he played and how well he played the position, we really thought that he could really fit in well with our scheme, and if we thought he was that good, we probably wouldn't have waited till the last pick. But we liked him that much, and now I got to find a new quarterback.
Now I got to find a new quarterback. It's assumed that that's what they're going to do with that top pick, whether they stay where they are, move up to Chicago, or even move down. But it's assumed that they're going to get a quarterback. But it hasn't been revealed yet. I mean, they've kind of danced around that. Well, what about quarterback? Well, we really haven't had time to discuss it in great detail, et cetera, et cetera. So now that seems to be the end of Sam Howell as the starter when you say that, because, they're not going to be shopping around, I don't think, for a backup quarterback for Sam Howell. And if they are, it's not going to be in the first round, because you can get a backup quarterback further down. So this is maybe a little bit of damage control when he's asked later in the news conference, what about Sam Howell?
We really like what we have in Sam right now, so we're really excited about that too. I had a great, it's funny, I learned this from John Lynch. When you're sitting in your office all day, you kind of just get in this rut where you're just like, it's dark, you got all these weird lights, and you need to get out. So Sam came to the facility a couple weeks ago and got a chance to hang out, and instead of sitting in my office, we just took a walk around Commander's Park and around the fields, and got to know him a little bit better. So I feel really good about him too. So we got a lot of different things we can do, but still really excited about him.
Yeah, well, maybe not as a starter. And they've got him cheap for the next 2 years as a fifth-round pick. I think it'd be a strong backup. And it might be a little bit uncomfortable if they take Drake May, because May was the one who sat behind Sam Howell a few years ago at North Carolina before he got his chance to start for 2 years. But the other day, May was talking about that with Adam Schefter, and he said, no, we're good friends, and it's going to be okay. He did indicate, there might be a little bit of a strange feeling there, but he said he'd be wide open to it, and I assume, Sam Howell, the way he conducts himself in these news conferences, he's going to be okay with it too, and he'll say, let's compete. Let's compete for the job. He beat him out once. True, he had 2 years of experience quarterbacking in North Carolina, but theoretically, Drake May could have come in and taken his job in his freshman year and did not, sat behind him. More from the news conference, and this is all kind of new for this organization. It really hasn't worked this way since Charlie Casserly was here, where the general manager has control and works hand in hand with the coaching staff. And this is old news for Adam Peters, where he's been. He's worked in New England. He's worked in San Francisco. He's worked in functional organizations. Now he's working in one that is becoming functional, and it's all about the process of working with the coaching staff to try to determine who you want to take in the draft.
Anybody you work with, you figure out what their strengths, what their weaknesses are. Most coaches do a really good job of letting you know what they want out of the players. And really last week, that's what we had all our scouts in, and we did what we call profile tapes, and they presented players and what they're looking for in particular positions, whether it be defensive line, defensive end, linebacker, all those different things. And they do a good job presenting what they're exactly looking for in our particular scheme that we're doing. So that was new for all of us, including me, because I haven't worked with most of these coaches. So understanding what Joe Witt looks for on defense, what Cliff looks for on offense, and all the different positions. So you start to gain an understanding of how they can communicate with that. But until you really start going into meetings and seeing how they evaluate, you don't really know. But I think everybody's here for a reason, coaches and scouts. So I'm really confident in our ability to do that.
Yeah, that's the way it's supposed to work. You know, the coaches indicate who they want, what kind of players they want. The general manager goes out and gets them. They bring the players into camp. The coach decides who to keep. And generally, that's the key to success in the NFL. There have been very few cases where, as Bill Parcells says, the one who cooks the meal gets to shop for the groceries. It maybe worked that way in New England, but there was a guy named Brady playing quarterback all those years, and this is the way to go. It's the system that is most tested and most successful over the long course of history in the NFL. Now, the number one thing, quarterback, evaluating. How do you do that? They're due to talk to Jaden Daniels today. They are either talk to Drake May or will talk to Drake May in the next day or so, and then the possibility that Caleb Williams is going to be available. He will be if they move up to number one. There's no indication that they're really interested in doing that, although there's been a lot of speculation about Caleb Williams not wanting to play in Chicago, et cetera, et cetera. He's from here, went to Gonzaga, the whole deal. This is the Peters comment on how he evaluates quarterbacks.
If I knew that answer, I would be somewhere else, probably retired. I think that the gist of it is it's people evaluating people, and especially when it comes to that position, there's so much more that goes into it besides the tape. If you're evaluating a defensive end, I think we all can see what Nick Bosa or Myles Garrett looks like. And the quarterback, there's so much nuance that goes into it besides the talent, the skill set, and the arm strength and all that. So with really quarterback or any position, it's people evaluating people. So you're gonna make mistakes, and it's a matter of if you have a better hit rate. Really, that's the draft, is to try to hit on as many as you can. And the more hits you have, whether it's the first round pick or the seventh round pick or anywhere in between, that's how you build your team.
Yeah, but given the history of this franchise and how many times they've whiffed high in the draft on quarterbacks, and this is not Brock Purdy here of the seventh round. Hey, if we hit on that, that's great. You kind of got to get this right. I know it's just going to be his first move. It's going to be the first pick that he makes as a general manager. But this is not, sometimes you hit, sometimes you don't. If this one you're going to have to hit on. This is going to be right out of the box. This is going to be big for him. Now, if you're thinking, okay, pretty simple. If Caleb Williams goes 1 to the Bears, or if they trade the pick to somebody else, then you take Drake May of North Carolina. That's what many of the draft experts are saying, that he's the second best quarterback on the board. Tim Hasselbeck, who played quarterback in the NFL, played here for a year or so. He says May is the better quarterback. He said if he had the number one pick, he'd take May over Caleb Williams. Well, his former colleague at ESPN, Merrill Hodge, who is, I think, highly respected, played in the NFL, has studied tape for a long time, has coached, not at the NFL level, but at the lower levels. This was Merrill Hodge yesterday on the Colin Cowherd show, and what he thinks of Drake May after watching him on tape.
Now, I watch him function under pressures. I don't think I've yet to see him execute a pressure correctly, identify it. Oftentimes he misses it. Sometimes when you see his head in that position and he doesn't acknowledge it and make the throw, like those are concerning. So when I talk about processing, there's not a lot of things that I'm like really confident about that he processes things well, especially pressures. He is completely erratic when it comes to throwing the football. I mean, it's a big concern. I mean, can you button those things up? Can you get a little better? Here's what my ultimate belief is from playing in this league, coaching, studying this league for nearly 40 years. You just don't correct that. It actually is magnified when you get to the National Football League. That is when you become more erratic. And it's on all throws. It's short, intermediate, long. Now, he'll do enough to dazzle you. And here's where I always felt the problem is that you say, oh, I'm going to fix that. I'll make him smarter. I'll make him more accurate. And that's where people get fired when you do that. And there's just too much there that would I wouldn't give him a first round grade. I wouldn't take him in the first round. And if I did, then I would be very concerned of, how long I'm going to be around as a coach or a GM.
That's Merrill Hodge, who at one time was a part of that show, The Edge matchup, where he would be on with Ron Jaworski and Greg Cosell. And they did a really good job of breaking down film. I respect his opinion, and I think there's merit to what he says about possibly not taking Drake May in the first round. The flip side of that might be the argument on that, and I don't know if the Commanders would really have the luxury of doing this, even with Sam Howell there. But when Kansas City drafted at 10, wasn't 1 or 2, but when they took Mahomes at 10, they had Alex Smith there, and they were a playoff team. And they sat Mahomes for a full year. And, some of the criticism of Mahomes was he was, playing backyard football all the time. His footwork wasn't good. And that full year that he had to learn really helped him. Now, if he'd have been thrown in as a rookie, who knows? I mean, I think he still would have been great. And maybe, there'd be no difference what he is now versus how he started out. But generally speaking, these quarterbacks who get an opportunity to sit and watch and learn, at least for a year, benefit from that. So if they are going to take Drake May, and you do buy into the criticisms that Merrill Hodge has of him, maybe you're patient enough to say, well, we're not going to play him until he's ready to play. And we got a quarterback who made 17 starts last year, and we've got a quarterback who Drake May once sat behind for a year at North Carolina. So, maybe we'll do it that way. I don't know. I mean, everybody at this point is spitballing. Nobody knows, but you just kind of look at what's being said or listen to what's being said and watch and see what your eyes tell you. But the opinions are vast on this guy. Some say can't miss, next great quarterback in the NFL, and some like Merrill Hodge say, wouldn't touch him in the first round. I'd be worried about my job if I did. Yep. Welcome to March. We're not quite there yet, but the league year starts in March, and the free agency period opens on the 13th, with the legal tampering allowed to open up on March 11th. Much more on that still to come. Next, Albert Breer of SI.com on with Rich Eisen yesterday on what the Bears will do with the number 1 pick. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
If you're just jumping in your car, that decrepit old football stadium is still there in Landover, but we won't be calling it FedEx anymore. FedEx has exercised the clause in the contract which allows them to drop the naming rights 2 years early if the team has been sold, as they were. So 2 more years, which would have brought in another $15 million to the team. That's not going to happen. They're going to look for another sponsor, and I don't know what we're going to call it. The team has not announced the name. Remember when they took Jack Kent Cooke's name off the stadium when Snyder bought it in '99? It was Redskins Stadium for a little while, and then it became FedEx Field. But they're looking around for a new name. And also, this is happening today. They are voting on this bill that would allow the land that RFK Stadium sits on to become used for commercial use, which would open the door to build a stadium there. And what they want to do is they want to extend the lease, which is on federal land, another 99 years. And that would allow, them to build the stadium with hotels and restaurants and everything else around that. It's expected to pass. Maryland lawmakers are against it. They're hoping the team stays in Maryland, in which case they would stay in Landover. The plan would be that they would build the stadium closer to the Morgan Boulevard metro station, which is like a mile away now from the current stadium. But I think I think most people are rooting for this to go through and that there will be a football stadium in the nation's capital again. All right, Albert Breer yesterday on the Rich Eisen show, and the question surrounding the Chicago Bears with, what they're going to do, and the question about Justin Fields, the quarterback, what are they going to do? Are they going to hang on to him and take Caleb Williams? Will they trade him before free agency opens? And Ryan Poles, the general manager, yesterday talked about that and said that if they decided to deal him, they would do it before free agency, because obviously it'd be a lot tougher for him after that's done. Let me give you the exact quote on that. Poles said, "We want to do right by Justin, which means trading him before the free agent negotiating period opens March 11th to maximize their return." So, so that's how that stands. But otherwise, what are they going to do with the number one pick? Whether you trade Fields or not, are you going to use it on Caleb Williams? Or will you trade down, maybe even still get a quarterback like J.J. McCarthy later in the draft, maybe even flop with the Commanders and get Drake May or Jaden Daniels? Those things are all in play. Albert Breer covers the NFL for SI.com. Seems to be his belief that the Bears are going to stick with the pick and take Caleb Williams.
They have an idea of what they think of Caleb Williams, and I think this week is about confirming it. But I still think the likelihood is that they stick at one and take him because, look, like he's a generational talent. Like he's a once every few years type of quarterback, and it gives them a chance to reset the rookie contract clock for your quarterback, which is invaluable. So, I think this week's going to be about, again, like he said, information gathering and gathering what they could get for the number one overall pick and gathering what is possible for Justin Fields. And they've allowed a lot of that to happen to this point, naturally, having teams come to them rather than the other way around. But, Ryan said it himself. Like, if we're trading Justin Fields, the fair thing to do is to trade him before free agency starts. It's what's fair for Justin. It's also what's best for them because there are going to be far fewer quarterback vacancies 4, 5, 6 weeks from now. So, with free agency just a couple of weeks away, I don't think there's any question that Justin has that Ryan Poles has it in his head. Like, this is probably what we're going to do, pending the last piece of the information gathering that we do this week.
What's your best guess as to what the markets are for the first overall pick and for Justin Fields?
Well, with the first overall pick, it sort of depends on how far down you're coming from, right? Like, so, Minnesota at 11 or Denver at 12, we're going to have to pay more pick-wise than Washington would for flopping, for flip-flopping their 1 and 2. But this is seen as a very rich quarterback draft and a quarterback draft that's very strong at the top. So I think the teams that have the top 3 picks are all going to have strong markets for their picks. And I think there is a separation between Caleb Williams and Drake May and Jaden Daniels. So if the Bears were to auction the pick off, I think they could get a lot for it. I think more than 3 first-round picks, if you're talking about going outside the top 10 to 11 or 12. I think it'd be that sort of haul for him. Justin Fields, I think, because of the contractual situation, and again, none of this is Justin's fault. It's a weird circumstance where they had somebody else's first-round pick, and that team wound up being the worst team in the league. So it's not like he was the quarterback of the worst team in the league, and that's what put them in this situation. And they love him. They think you can win with him. But I think that they want to do right by Justin. This is a GM and Ryan Poles who took Justin into the draft room, took him into the war room 2 years ago when he first got there, and basically showed him the draft board and explained this is why we probably aren't taking a receiver in the second round, right? So he's going to be transparent the same way with Justin this time around. I think he's going to try to get him to the best place possible for Justin as well as for the Bears. And I think we're probably talking, and most ballpark I've got, people don't think they're going to be able to get a 1 for him, but a day 2 pick plus a day 3 pick, which is affected, of course, by his contractual situation that he's only got 1 year left on his rookie deal, that the 5th-year option is really expensive if you decide to pick that up. So I think we're talking, again, a day 2 pick and a day 3 pick, whether that's a 2 and a 5 or a 3 and a 7, whatever it is, I think depends on how many teams wind up being in it, but I think it's somewhere in that ballpark.
Who's in it for Fields? You're here in Pittsburgh and Atlanta, and you're here in Raiders, all the
Atlanta's
usual suspects.
The one I have circled. I've heard that the owner really liked him. 3 years ago. And I think, I think if you're Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot, what going and getting Justin Fields does for you with a roster that's already pretty built out is he gives you a swing at getting your quarterback for the next 5 or 10 years, but not the sort of swing as if you took one 5th overall or 7th overall or 9th overall, right? In other words, they could trade for Justin Fields and still take a quarterback this year in the first round or next year or the year after. He gives you a shot at having a long-term answer at quarterback, but you're also not like handcuffed. So you can still take more shots at it as you go. So I think that's why for Atlanta, he makes sense. Now, Pittsburgh, I think, is possible. Mike Tomlin's got a lot of strong connections to the Ohio State program. They're going to be able to get good information on him. Arthur Smith did pass on him 3 years ago, though, right? Like, so Arthur Smith's offense can work for him. What does he think of him? Vegas would be another one, but Luke Getsy's there. So what does Luke Getsy think after working with him the last couple of years? Does he want to build an offense in Vegas the same way that he built one for him in Chicago? I think those would be the teams I'd start with. And, again, like you go down the list of teams that have franchise quarterbacks or that took quarterbacks high the last couple of years, you get to a point where it's like, no more than a handful of teams probably get involved in this.
Well, I mean, if say you're a team like Washington or New England, no one's really even mentioning Washington as a Justin Fields location because everybody thinks they're just going to go and get the kid they want in the draft, not named Caleb Williams. But you could get Justin Fields now for, as you pointed out, a day 2 pick or 2, and add Marvin Harrison Jr. to the mix using that choice. Right. You could stay put, and then you get the best receiver that a lot of people think have come out of the draft in quite some time for Justin Fields, right? I mean, like that's the benefit of going to get Justin Fields now. That's how you could work it.
And I think it would work for Washington more than it would for New England, just because I think Washington's roster is a little bit more built out.
Right.
New England has so many needs, right? Like if you look at, and they've got needs at premium positions, Rich, like tackle, receiver, quarterback. It really is sort of a ground up rebuild. Whereas like Washington, you can start to look around their roster. And yes, they traded the defensive ends, but they have Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen. They drafted Emmanuel Forbes last year. At receiver, they've got Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. So Washington, I could see it a little bit more because you can get yourself to a place where you're like, okay, I could see where it would make sense for them because maybe they're a little bit closer, and adding a Marvin Harrison could put them over the top. The one thing about that is, though, San Francisco wasn't wild about Fields 3 years ago. And the new general manager there, the guy who's going to be making this pick, came from San Francisco.
Yeah, that would be Adam Peters. So there's no indication really that he likes Justin Fields. But the scenario that Rich Eisen lays out there with Albert Breer is worth considering. Wouldn't you want to see Marvin Harrison lining up opposite Terry McLaurin? I think that would be pretty cool. With Justin Fields as the quarterback, who's probably a B. He's not at the A level of quarterbacks in the NFL. You might say Brock Purdy's at that level. Okay, so Brock Purdy got his team to the Super Bowl. You'd take that, wouldn't you? But again, I think you're spot on there. I don't think they're interested. The team that seems most likely to get Fields is the Atlanta Falcons. And Raheem Morris, not a very good poker player, new coach there. He spoke at the Combine yesterday about his quarterbacks, the two that are still there, Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke, who we all remember here. He said, if we had better quarterback play, I'm probably not standing here at the podium. Meaning, I guess he thought the team was good enough under Arthur Smith with a decent quarterback that they would have been in the playoffs and he would have stayed. They were 7-10 last year. And Morris said, I won't bring up any names. Well, there's only 2 there. So, you don't have to bring them up. He said, I won't bring up any names, but when you're going through the process, you have everything open. We've got so many avenues right now because we now have free agency money. We have the ability to trade, whether it be a trade for a player with a team or be it a trade up or back in the draft. It's really just about different scenarios you want to have at the quarterback position. Falcons are picking 8. I don't think that they would trade 8 for Justin Fields, who has only one more year to go on his contract, but that might be in play. Now, back to Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams, it's been said, doesn't want to play in Chicago. He hasn't said that. It's also been reported that his dad has made noise about him not wanting to be in Chicago, or that his dad is looking for a piece of the franchise, which can't happen. All those things may be in play, but Williams is playing it right. He was interviewed by Pete Thamel of ESPN last night, and he said, this is Caleb Williams talking, if I get drafted by the Bears, I'll be excited. If they trade the pick and I get drafted by someone else, I'm just as excited. Speaking about Chicago, they have a talented team, a talented offense and defense. For anyone to be in that situation, I think they'd be excited. And then he was asked about, the possibility that he would request a trade or want to play someplace else. He says, I'm not pushing any agenda. At the end of the day, the Bears have the last say. Regardless of how I feel, I'm not pushing an agenda of, I want to go or I don't want to go. I'm excited for whatever comes. And, he said the right things, how much he liked Walter Payton and Michael Jordan and deep dish pizza and blah, 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 blah. So he's not going to publicly put up a fight, but there could be fights going on behind the scenes. There have been cases, you have to go back to the 80s for this, but there were a couple of cases where number one didn't wind up with that team that drafted him, as he said, I don't want to go there. John Elway, famously 1983, I don't want to go to the Baltimore Colts, and if they draft me, I'm going to play baseball for the Yankees. Well, he was not going to be a major league player if he stayed with the Yankees, but the Colts blinked and sent him to Denver, and the rest is history. And the other one would be Bo Jackson. Bo Jackson said to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, don't draft me. If you draft me, I will play baseball. He should have stayed with baseball because he might have become one of the all-time greats if he hadn't hurt his hip playing football. But he said, if you draft me, I will play baseball, which is what he did. And the reason is that Tampa lied to him. They brought him in for a pre-draft physical, look at his height, weight, all that stuff, and they flew him in on a private plane from Auburn. He was in the middle of a baseball season in Auburn where he was killing it, crushing home runs. He wanted to play his senior year of baseball, and he said to the Bucks, is this against NCAA rules if you take me on a private plane? No, we checked. They flew him back and forth on a private plane, and Auburn was informed that Bo Jackson was no longer eligible for college sports. So he said, I'll play in the NFL, but I won't play for Tampa Bay, and he never did. And Elway never played for the Colts. This situation doesn't seem to be developing that way. At least publicly. Now, behind the scenes, who knows? And once he gets in the interview process with the Bears and Ryan Poles, and they sit down and maybe he's, making it clear that he doesn't want to go there, then things change a little bit. But publicly saying all the right things, that, Chicago, great. Who wouldn't want to be in this spot? Who wouldn't want to be the number one pick of the draft? And I think that's a good sign right now. What it means in the long run, we don't know. And how about this? Not that this should be a surprise, because anybody that would trade for Russell Wilson would have to pick up that ridiculous contract that he's got. He's got this deal that runs through the 2028 season, and so nobody's picking that up at the cost and the way he's played. But the general manager of the team, his name is actually George Patton, not General George Patton, but George Patton with one T. He said, we haven't heard anything from any teams when asked about a potential, so we'll see. He's expected to be released in the next couple of weeks, and with the 5 years left on his contract, if the Broncos can't find a trade partner, they're expected to cut him to avoid paying him $37 million in guaranteed money for 2025, and would still face $89 million in cap charges. Wow. And just think, 2 years ago, Washington was offering the moon to get this guy. They would have given up anything, and he turned up his nose and said, nah, don't want to play there, want to play in Denver. And it's been 2 really bad seasons, and finally they had to bench him at the end of the year because if he got hurt and was unable to pass a physical next month, they would be on the hook for him for the 2025 money as well. As it is, they're still going to owe him $39 million even when they cut him loose. So it's likely that Wilson will sign someplace else for the veteran minimum as a free agent, whatever it is, $1 million, $1.5 million, and we'll get the rest of the money from Denver. But, boy, talk about a tumble. Talk about a guy who, when Tom Brady won his last Super Bowl playing for Tampa, there were shots of Russell Wilson sitting in a private box, looked like him sitting by himself, sulking because he felt like that should have been him. Hey, Tom Brady got to go where he wanted to go and win a Super Bowl. I want to do that too. So he got to go where he wanted to go, and now they're about to cut him loose. Such is the NFL. Baseball, Bryce Harper in an interesting spot. We'll get to his situation as it's kicked around by Tony and Mike on PTI as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Lots more yak coming up from the Combine in Indianapolis. Tony's got a show at 11 o'clock. We shift a little to baseball here. And, the fun times of spring and the Cactus League and the Grapefruit League. In the Grapefruit League, you can watch the Nationals play the Red Sox today at 1 o'clock. And you know how some guys sign these enormous contracts and the pressure gets to them? Doesn't look like that's going to happen to Shohei Ohtani. Playing his first exhibition game for the Dodgers yesterday, a game against the White Sox, struck out, grounded out in his first couple of bats, and then, boom, 2-run home run. And remember, he's not going to pitch this year because he had the Tommy John surgery, but I guess it's not affecting his elbow at the plate. He's going to be a DH this year, and he's bombing them, and I don't think the $700 million contract is going to be a big problem for him. I think that's going to be okay. Meantime, across the country, you got Bryce Harper. And Bryce Harper, as you remember, was offered, and I believe it was a 10-year deal. Bryce Harper was offered $300 million to re-sign here for the 2019 season. Now, they didn't really want him to take it, the Lerners, because Juan Soto was developing so well, and they wanted to spend money in other places, which they did. And they said when he turned it down, and the way they did it, it was, kind of in a way like we really don't want you to take it, like it was before one of the last games of the 2018 season. Hey, Bryce, when you got a minute, come down to Mike Rizzo's office. Comes in, they present him with a contract offer, and he doesn't take it. And there's the assumption that they're going to go up, but they're not. And Mark Lerner at one point says, oh, yeah, we understand. He'll probably get $400 million someplace else. And Scott Boras shopped, and he shopped, and he went back to the Nats, wanted to see, at that time, Ted Lerner still alive at his home in Florida. Let's see if we can get something. Nope, that's okay, $300 million. So they shopped, and they shopped, and they shopped. And the big thing that Boras wanted to do was to get Harper the biggest contract ever. Giancarlo Stanton at that time had a $325 million contract. So the key was to get Harper to $330. But he had to extend the years to 13 years. 13. So really, it was less money per year than what the Nats were offering. Tied him up for 13 years. And the contract, unlike the ones that he had for other clients, such as Steven Strasburg, had no opt-out. Harper signed with the Phillies, and he said, I don't want to have an opt-out. This is where I want to stay. Well, now the salaries have changed, such as the $700 million deal for Shohei Ohtani, and the $330 that Bryce Harper has, which was quickly topped by Mike Trout. It was like, Harper, when he got to Philadelphia, said, I'm going to try and get Mike Trout from the Angels. And Trout said, nope, I'm going to re-sign here, and I'm getting a lot more money than you are, almost $100 million more. So now, Harper is not exactly middle class, but he's not at the top of the chain anymore with that contract. And there's reports that he's looking for an extension that would give him more money. Should he get it? Tony and Mike looking at it yesterday on PTI.
The 31-year-old Harper has 8 years left on his 13-year, $330 million deal with the Phillies, and no opt-outs. He agreed to that. Harper had an OPS of 900 last year, but his salary of $25 million currently puts him 29th in baseball salary. Tony, should the Phillies even be open to negotiating an extension for Bryce Harper?
Only if they want Bryce Harper to be happy. Only if they are afraid he will pout and he will go in the tank if they don't do this. So everything has to be on the table for the Phillies.
Total James Harden.
They have to consider that if they don't do this, they may have to trade Bryce Harper. Look, let's understand what's going on here. The Phillies have no obligation to do this. They gave Harper what seemed like a great deal at the time. It was the most money in baseball ever. $330 million over 13 years. Harper wanted the record, and he got it, and Harper said, I don't have to have any opt-outs. So that's the position that they're in now. But Harper has also performed in a great manner for the Phillies. And if he's looking for more money at this point, you have to consider, if you're the Phillies, how important is he to us? And he's your most important player. Yeah. And how important is it that we keep him happy?
Slippery slope, Tony. If you do this, there's going to be, anytime somebody outperforms his salary, they're going to want an extension or renegotiate, which can't happen in every sport. Like the NBA, you don't get extensions like that. Not quite like that. Tony, remember when this happened with Ricky Henderson, when you and I were covering baseball? And Ricky signed for like $3 million in November. And by the time we got to spring training, he was like, 20th in salary. And he says, Ricky wants a new deal. So this Bryce Harper is not the first dude to do this. And he's in Philadelphia, my God, where he just saw James Harden force his way out. Just, I don't want to be here. I got a contract. I don't care. So, and don't think that a guy like Bryce Harper is not paying attention to the other leagues, because he is. But I wouldn't do it if I was the Phillies. Bryce Harper he's had one great season in Philly. He's had multiple seasons where he's played up to the contract.
He's MVP in Philly.
One great season.
Mike, he's the 29th highest paid player in baseball now. Of the 28 who are above him, only Mike Trout has more MVPs.
Glad you mentioned that.
I'm going to spend somebody else's money now. Okay. And it's easy for me to do. But I would consider doing this. I'd consider keeping the faith, because he's that important to that team in that city, unless you're willing to deal him.
And I don't know how many teams would be willing to deal for him. I guess if he's the 28th best paid player and he's far better than that in skills, somebody might. But what you hear out of Philadelphia is the fans love this guy. He's like the consummate Philadelphia athlete. He's got that thing going that the Philly fans like, and maybe to keep everybody happy and say, hey, you're relative to what everybody else is making, you're underpaid here. So maybe they would do that. Now Boris, this is the hubris of Boris too, that he could have signed him to a shorter deal. Teams would have been willing to give him more money for less years, but he wanted, because he's Boris, to say, hey, we got him the most money ever. That didn't last long, as he was zoomed past by Mike Trout, and now he's been doubled up by Shohei Ohtani, basically, and he's got 8 years left on the deal. Not that we should hold a benefit for Bryce Harper making $28 million a year, but relative to his talent and how beloved he is in the city and by the fan base and by his teammates, maybe you think about it. That's kind of the way things work. Coming up next hour, more talk from the Combine. Dan Quinn on what he's looking for in a quarterback. And Peter King raises an interesting question about Bill Belichick and the Commanders. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Well, we know that Taylor Swift endeared herself to Travis Kelce, her boyfriend, but she also endeared herself to the entire Kansas City Chiefs team in a very smart way, as Andy Reid revealed yesterday at the Combine in Indianapolis. We'll hear that later this hour. Also, comments from Dan Quinn, the new coach of the Commanders, what he's looking for in a quarterback. Also more from Adam Peters, the new general manager of the team, and Peter King raising an interesting question about Bill Belichick as he talked to Dan Patrick yesterday. We will get to all of that. Also, if you're just jumping in your car, have not heard the news, no more FedEx Field. The stadium's going to stand for a while, unfortunately, but FedEx used a clause in the contract which allows them to get out of the naming rights 2 years early, so they don't have to pay the Commanders $15 million over the next 2 years, and I guess the team is now free to look for a new name, which there's not a lot of time to do that, but they will attempt to get a new name for the team. The original deal, and it's pretty amazing when you think about the dollars, compared to what they are now. The entire cost of buying the stadium and the football team for Dan Snyder in 1999 was $800 million. He got a $205 million naming rights deal, boom, like right away, like a few games into the season. And that was due to expire in 2026, but because the team was sold, FedEx used the clause and said, we're out, which, according to the Post, surprised them because of all the goodwill about what was going on with the new ownership and how everybody was coming back to a sellout stadium and all that kind of stuff. But it is what it is, and they'll look for a new name. Now, Nats Park has never gotten a corporate name. Same thing with Camden Yards. It's not that easy. It's tougher than it used to be. And there were companies that you couldn't put on a name now, like Enron Field. Remember that? Yeah. So there are these pop-up tech companies that came and went. Those naming rights had to come off of the stadium. I think banks are secure, so M&T Bank Stadium is going to be okay in Baltimore for a little while. Also, today there is going to be a bill that is going to be voted on that could clear the way for the Commanders to move to the RFK Stadium site. This is the bill you've heard talked about for a while, where they would have the lease, which is on federal land. They would extend that for 99 years, but change the terms so you could have commercial property around the stadium. You could have hotels and restaurants and things like that, which would seem to open the door, and that bill is expected to pass today. All right, basketball here. Let me slip this in before we get deep into the combine conversation from yesterday. Buzzer beaters happen in the NBA, but they don't usually happen from 59 feet. So last night, two good teams. It's Dallas at home against the Cleveland Cavaliers. 2.9 seconds to go. Dallas's P.J. Washington dunks, and it puts Dallas up by 1. This is what follows for the Cavaliers with Tim Alcorn at the microphone.
Cavs out of timeout. Strus into Mobley. Back to Max. Half-court shot. Good! Good! He hit it! Cavs win! This place is going crazy! The Cavaliers had 2.6. They were out of timeouts. Strus let it fly. Strus hit nothing but net. Strus on the loose with the game winner. 121, 119 in one of the most incredible endings you will ever see.
I saw Jerry West, I think it was the 1970 finals, the Lakers against the Knicks, and West hit a half-court shot. But unfortunately for West in those days, there's no three-point shot, and so that sent the game into overtime, and the Knicks won in OT. But this was very exciting last night for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And is that a court-storming worthy shot? Even if that game was played in Cleveland, no, the fans wouldn't have stormed the court because they don't do that in the NBA. And college, the debate rages on, and we're not going to get into that today again. As for the Wizards last night, could you count on a game like that from Steph Curry? He was scoreless in the first half for the first time in 12 years. For the game, his shooting was terrible. He was 6 of 21 from the field, 4 of 16 from 3. Steph Curry, 4 of 16. But they now play Klay Thompson off the bench, and it seems to be suiting him because he was shooting terribly. He was 9 of 16 last night for 25 points, and Golden State won the game. And Jordan Poole against his old team, boy, has he been a dead disappointment. 5 of 17, he had 12 points, did not start, and did not look good. Kyle Kuzma had a nice game for them, and Corey Kispert had 20 points, 8 of 15 from the field. But this is your chance. Not that they were going to beat Golden State, but, if you got a night like that from Steph Curry, you ought to be able to at least make it close. And it was an 11-point margin. It looked like, most of the second half, Golden State was up by 20 points. It was a pretty comfortable win for them, even though it was only by 11. They had things pretty well in hand. So there's that. All right, on to the football. And let's get to what Dan Quinn said. Last year, you may remember that Ron Rivera didn't go to the Combine. And he said, look, the interview process is the most important thing. And I don't believe we can really get a good picture of a player at the Combine. We'd much rather have him at our facility or at a pro day or something like that. He didn't want to do it in Indianapolis. Dan Quinn, who's been a head coach before and took Atlanta to the Super Bowl, He says he shows up at the combine specifically for the interview process.
One of the things that I do enjoy about this time is the interview portion. And you're really trying to get into, not the ball player, but the man, and find out what they are, what they stand for. And we're looking for that kind of competitor, that kind of toughness. And so you ask some leading questions to find those answers. But I enjoy that part as much as any. It might be running back, it could be defensive end, it's that quarterback, but just digging in, behind the scenes about the person first. And then if we get that part the way, that we think it fit and be together, then the tape and that stuff comes in second.
So, not that the tape isn't important, but he wants to make sure that he's getting the right person. This is the old changing the culture. He didn't use that, thank God, but the culture obviously is important and finding the right guy. Now, some of the things more deeply that he wants to find out in the interview process.
What he's about, what's his why, what are the things that drives him, if there was something that had jammed him up in the past, who would be coming with them, if they moved to this city, just knowing their family backgrounds. And it's very complex for a player coming out today, and they've been exposed to NIL deals from college. They've been exposed to transfer portals. And so I think the player who's coming out today, they have probably a deeper story in some aspects than others do. And I think it makes those connections, Nikki, even more important to find out, why'd you stay when everybody said to go, or you weren't the starter? And I think those kind of examples of resilience and finding ways, or conversely, a player that had to go to another place to find their opportunity. There's just more stories and more depth to it, Nikki. So I think that, to me, is where it is. The evaluations with Adam and his guys on the physical traits of the players, that's going to stay consistent no matter where we're at. But finding who the person is inside the helmet, inside the rib cage, that starts in moments like now.
And Nikki is Nikki Javala, who has been covering the team for, I think, 4 years, maybe 5, for the Washington Post. He's been here a couple of weeks and has already learned her name. That, I think, tells you a little bit about Quinn, too, that he's very, very media friendly and seems to be. Again, don't know him, never met him, hear good things about him, but as far as who he is and exactly what kind of person he is, don't know. This is another interesting part of yesterday's media session. He went about 15 minutes with reporters, and there was somebody there from Atlanta that asked a question, and Quinn knew this number. This is really funny. Knew this exact number, and it was the question about, he had been in Atlanta. Now he's getting his second opportunity. There had been some discussion that he might wind up back with Seattle, where he'd been a very successful defensive coordinator on their Super Bowl team. And this is how he answered the question. This is how he answered the question about not going to Seattle and winding up here.
It's been 1,234 days since I was let go. And so there has been plenty of opportunity led to make sure that I thought a lot about this. And from the staff standpoint, from the processes that need to go in place, the personnel, the scouting, my involvement with them. And so more so now than ever, I've really had a chance to reflect and do that. And so every once in a while, you're at the right place at the right time in your life and in your career. And I certainly feel like that's this place right now for me.
How about that? He knows exactly the number of days since Atlanta let him go. I assume he's going to let that go pretty soon. And he talked about this at his introductory news conference, that the time he's had, all those days, he's had time to reassess himself, and he knew when he got his next opportunity, he wasn't going to make some of the same mistakes that he made in Atlanta, which may have cost him his job there. So that I felt was interesting to hear. More from Dan Quinn, and Quinn is a long distance runner. He's not Bill Belichick at these news conferences. He will talk. So when the question was asked, what are you looking for in a quarterback as you scout these guys at the combine and do the interviews and so forth? And by the way, the top prospects are not going to throw. They're there just for the interviews and to get weighed and measured and all that stuff. So they're not at the combine to see Caleb Williams throw the football or Drake May or Jaden Daniels. Those guys aren't going to throw at the combine. But this is what he says he is looking for when he's trying to find his quarterback.
Number one, you better be really tough, mentally, physically tough, because there's going to be times when the person is open. On the physical toughness, you got to stay in there to deliver it, into the right spot. I think you have to have the mental toughness to withstand all that's going on and keep your focus right here on the team, right with the group that you're with. As far as like a performance side, I think you better show accuracy on the deep ball, because when those moments for explosive plays are there, there's a single high coverage, there's a man-to-man, it's an all-out blitz, and you nail those moments, that's where the explosive plays are driven. So you certainly want to look for a quarterback who can get out of a bad play. In our NFL, it doesn't just all time up evenly. I think if you guys look at the stats, we had more mobile scrambling quarterbacks this year than maybe at any time over the last 20 years. And so a lot of that is when a play breaks down, they can go create and get on the move to go. And so how do you speed up when a blitz is coming and it's not there yet and you buy time to let that happen? Those are traits that are hard to measure. They're not accuracy. How do you get out of a bad play? There's not a metric for that. How do you speed up a throw that the blitz is coming? It's not quite there yet, but you have to get rid of it early because you're about to get drilled. Those are things that you look for. And so that's why at that position, the tape, you have to find that. You have to get out of bad plays. You got to be able to speed up. You got to show that kind of toughness. And there's all sorts of ways to look at it. I can certainly remember during my time in Atlanta inviting Ron Wolf down to training camp just so I could spend 2 days with him evaluating quarterbacks that were in that year's draft. What did you see and what did it look like? And I can remember we were watching one player and there was an interception and he had said, wind that back. And I was thinking he was thinking about the interception. No, you could let it run now. And it was to see how hard was the player going after that had the interception. So like he wasn't looking at the mechanic of the throw. He was studying the person and the competitiveness of stuff. So I think there's a lot of details that go into that position. We'd probably have a really long press conference on it, but it's also what makes my job and Adam's job really fun, to make sure you're finding somebody with rare, unique stuff and then develop it over and over and over.
That's interesting from Ron Wolf, and that's Dan Quinn on the evaluation of quarterbacks, that he wants a quarterback to try and chase down a defender who picks off a pass. You get hurt that way a lot. And I remember this, Sonny Jurgensen, George Allen's first year, and you wonder if Sonny had stayed healthy for those first 2 years. He wasn't healthy for the Super Bowl, which they lost to the Dolphins. He had torn his Achilles in the middle of the year. Billy Kilmer played in that game. But if he'd stayed healthy, especially the first year, where he wasn't going to be benched for Kilmer, Sonny broke his shoulder in a preseason game chasing down a defender who picked off a pass. And Robert Griffin, in his first year, did that as well, tried to run down a defender. I don't know if he caught him, but Sonny said to him after the game, this was in the preseason, you don't want to be doing that. That you get hurt on that. And here's Ron Wolf saying, yeah, I want to see this quarterback chase down a defender. Interesting. But that's a lengthy answer to what he's looking for. He will have a big say in it, obviously, but Adam Peters is also going to have a big say in this. And this is not his first rodeo, as he was part of the San Francisco front office. And they whiffed on Trey Lance. We're not going to hear him talk much about Trey Lance, where they traded up to take a guy at 3 who really never played for him and shipped them off to Dallas for a fourth rounder or whatever it was. So maybe it was a third rounder, but that didn't work out at all. Brock Purdy did. But, that's all part of what he says is the learning process, and he's not telling you, I know exactly how to pick a quarterback. This is what he says about the draft process.
I think, you learn more and more every time you do it, and most of them are mistakes. I feel like it's really hard to evaluate quarterbacks, but you just try to get better and try to understand what you did the last time that was really good, what you did last time that was really bad, different processes. Hopefully there's not a whole lot of bad things that you did, but you always learn. And so it's constantly evolving, and I don't think anybody has the magic pill to understand that one. If they do, let me know. I'll hire them. But I think that's it. Just keep learning every year you do it.
Okay, all right, yeah, and he says you're wrong most of the time. That's not a good thing to say as you're getting ready, perhaps, to take what they hope will be the franchise quarterback at number 2 or. Well, even if they move up to number 1, I don't know if that's going to happen, but that could still be in play, that Caleb Williams could possibly wind up in Washington. You better get it right don't say you're wrong more often than not. Yeah, maybe you are, but I don't know if that's something you actually want to say. All right, Terps tonight, trying to finish 500. They've got to win their last 3 games. It's probably too late, but they are coming off their best defensive game as Rutgers gave them nothing over the weekend. We'll see what happens as they play Northwestern tonight. That'll be in College Park. And here we got Virginia playing on the road at Boston College, and our coverage will get underway at 8:30. There is going to be some more Combine yak today. I'm not sure if we're going to hear from Dan Quinn or Adam Peters. That may have been their one media opportunity yesterday. The big takeaways are that they're evaluating everything. Peters sort of tipped his hand a little bit, saying, hey, I found Brock Purdy. Now I got to find another quarterback. But when asked about Sam Howell, he said, I like Sam Howell. We had a nice chat as we walked around the park and stuff like that. So I don't know if we'll get anything definitive today, but Jaden Daniels is supposed to be interviewed, and we'll see where that goes. But the yakety yak is going to continue because we're still nearly 2 months away from the NFL draft. So stay tuned. We will follow up with more on that tomorrow. Tony is coming up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.